Welcome to Grab Your Gear. A little different setup today as we are in election headquarters, something we just made up 3.5 minutes ago. No, we are here. Obviously, the election dominates the storyline, so we're going to talk about that here with my co-host, who never really knew he was a co-host, but you are, Jack, because you're here every week, and eventually you're the co-host.
I didn't know what a co-host was, and now I am one.
That's right. Jack Windsor, of course, of the Windsor Report, and the Ohio Press Network, which a newspaper publication, which is an electronic digital newspaper that you founded, and also on The Answer.
That's right, 98.9 FM. The Answer in Columbus.
Ohio?
And if you're out, yes, Ohio. If you're outside the listing area, 989theanswer.com is where you can go. All of our episodes are archived. Or if you're a Spotify person, just search up the Windsor Report, and all the shows are there.
Okay. Obviously, we're based in Ohio, but we are here for all merit shop workers and anybody that gets up and goes to work in the morning who don't have time to listen to all of the nonsense that's basically broadcast, digitized, and thrown your way via your phone, television, car radio, Sirius Satellite Network, and all the other ways that people are reaching out to you. And it's important that we acknowledge the people that get up and work. You know, I'm actually having some work done at my house, getting my roof replaced. I was talking to Tinfoil Ted in the commissary earlier, and I was saying it's nice to talk to people that get up and have to make their living by doing something physical and actually following up with customer service these days. Right. And that is what we like about the trades and construction. And you know what? We always talk about the merit shops, but it's also the union guys. A lot of them, it doesn't matter if you work in a union. We're for just do the best job and at the best price. So for all you people that get up and go to work in the morning, this is a network that was really created for you. And Amen. I think you're on board with that, right?
I am, 100%. My grandpa was actually a union president, believe it or not. And his famous line was, "I'm for the working man." And, we've produced an entire docuseries on how that union reality has shifted from being for the working man to being for the political man. But yes, I prize people who get up every day, go to work, and make it happen.
Of course, that documentary series is called The Union Hustle, which of course you host, and that is on the platform, the Grab Your Gear Network. I believe you've put those on the Ohio Press Network. You host those as well, and hopefully that's something you'll check out. But the news really, is there anything else to talk about but the election? I mean, that's the one thing that is dominating. It's creating some angst. We've gone from joy to fascism on the presidential side. Last minute surprises. I am fully expecting a week full of just all kinds of things. I'm not going to lie. It's been through a lot of these. This one just feels...
Sorry, something went wrong.
That's you, Jack, not me. Something went wrong with Siri.
Right when you were trying to say something feels different.
Well, you know, that's exactly right. Is somebody listening to me? I mean, Siri, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, something went wrong. Is that foretelling?
It's fortuitous. You know, I've talked a lot in the past, ad nauseum, means till you're sick to your stomach about it, about Molly Ball. Molly Ball wrote an article for Time magazine circa February 2021, where she unpacked all the details regarding the 2020 election. And it appeared when I, read it then and when I go back and read it now, that she was riding sidecar with the entire movement that was designed to get Donald Trump out of the White House and put Joe Biden in the White House. And I say all of that to say this. If she knew what was going on then, I would, hazard a guess that she probably knows what's going on now. And I want to read this to you.
And people, just so people know who Molly Ball is.
Molly Ball is a writer, wrote for Time magazine back in 2021. She now has an article in the Wall Street Journal. She might be a contributor now at the Wall Street Journal. But she wrote a piece late last week, and in it she's really trying to describe the anxiety that both sides have, Democrats and Republicans, about this presidential election. And I'm reading down through it, and then I just had that moment. I read something, and I want to read it for you here, if I may. So she writes, would Democrats' superior field organization put them over the top, or would Elon Musk's sudden investment do the same for the GOP? In a race this close, nearly anything, a weather event in Wisconsin or a late-breaking scandal, could be decisive. And I kind of went, here's the girl who was riding sidecar with the progressive movement that dislodged Donald Trump in 2020. And she's saying, well, there could be a weather event in Wisconsin, or there could be a scandal that breaks. It just feels to me, Joe, that they've got one more bullet left in the chamber. And as we sit 7 days out, we're about to see it fired.
Well, they're going to do something. Tinfoil Ted and I were talking about this as well. I keep referring because we have these private conversations. They will not lose. The left I'm talking about. The losing is not an option. Burning is. Taking over municipalities is. And I am not just saying that very flippantly. I believe there are people that have so much angst in them that they just literally, emotionally, and mentally could not handle seeing Donald Trump go into the White House again.
Not only can they not handle it, they cognitively disassociate from their own behavior. I'm going to take you back to what I call the summer of love in 2020. Joe, between $1 and $2 billion of damage was done across the country. Over 200 police officers were assaulted. Somewhere around the ballpark of a dozen people were murdered. Yet the same group of people who were doing those things in our communities all over the country are still calling January 6th the most dangerous and deadly event in American history. There is such a cognitive dissonance on the left, it's disturbing.
See, I think that there are groups of people who create anxiety. I think there are groups of people that understand anxiety. And I think there are groups of people that know a lot. And I usually look at people who are have positions of authority, okay? Now, I want to play a clip of Marcus Allen. We've talked about him before, but I want to play this clip. We're going to share it with you. And I want to get Jack's reaction. This was a testimony 30 days ago before Congress. And Marcus Allen is an FBI agent who has basically resigned.
Yes.
He was a whistleblower. In a nutshell, he challenged the agency because he said, we are going after January 6 people, many of whom have not committed a felony or a crime. And that's it. I mean, he just said, this is not what I signed up for. And he said it's become political. At the end of his testimony, he shared his concern for the nation. And we're going to go to that right now.
I would offer this to the American people as my warning to them. Since this is a warning to the American people, I say, I personally have no confidence that the FBI will rein in its own conduct. I've been persecuted along with Garrett, Steve and Kyle, and countless other whistleblowers. It is my opinion that the Bureau used reprisal and fear to control the workforce. It has been a seemingly effective tactic. I personally believe that there are no current effective checks and balances against them conducting lawless action with any type of correction in a legitimate time frame. I welcome the work of the IG, but I think any type of lawless action, there's no legitimate time frame to rein them back in. Their ability to overclassify information can allow them to stonewall forever. To the American people, you have a duty as a citizen to vote, and I strongly urge you to do so. It's how you participate in the American experience. I know people have doubts about election integrity, but you must vote. It is your claim. Stake your claim and don't forfeit it willingly. Have your voice heard. My other recommendations are in the natural order. First, vote. The second is the Second Amendment. Arm yourself and know how to defend yourself. Make 3 to 4 friends in your neighborhood and promise to come to each other's mutual aid in times of hardship. And during the Great Depression, people stocked up a pantry. So I think that's a good practice, especially in our economic times, and make sure you have 3 to 4 months of food. And as a person of faith, I'd say pray the rosary, go to the First Friday devotions. That's for everybody, all my brothers and sisters of all faiths, and I know I'm Catholic, and read the gospel of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and live it every day. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for the time.
You know, Mr. Allen, the fact
That's an FBI agent who has a pretty solid record up until he started pushing back.
Most people have a solid record until they push back. I know we'll talk about this later, but Joe Rogan and Donald Trump last week talked about how the left loved Donald Trump until he actually became president, and then they went apoplectic, and the machine was set against him. This is what happens. The machine is set against him. This isn't a black evangelical pastor preaching about the end times to try to scare people into repentance or to donate money to the church. As you said, this is a former FBI agent
A month ago.
who is saying, you need to be prepared. The FBI is a dog that has its jaws around the bone, and it's not going to let go. And you're going to have to weather this attack. That is, I literally had goosebumps. That is chilling.
And what he's referring to, as he was talking about vote, and he's talking about the upcoming election, the issue is he's trying to point out, and you got to correct me if I'm wrong, he's kind of warning you that the FBI, it feels like they're contributing to the unrest versus preventing the unrest.
I don't know which agency it is. I don't know if it's the FBI, if it's the CIA, if it's the
All of them.
ATF. But Joe, we saw it in Springfield. We've seen it in other places where there is unrest, where Republicans like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance start to go, well, wait a minute, there's a problem in Springfield. All of a sudden, this group of people, fit men, show up wearing masks, carrying some sort of fascist ideology, whether it be in a flag or a banner. They show up, they march through the city, and then they disappear. And then the press covers that as if, wow, look at the fascists, look at the Nazis associated with these Republicans who are putting a spotlight on what's going on. You can't tell me that's not some sort of federal apparatus that is trying to drum up confusion, fear, to try to get people disassociated from that spotlight. And the reality is you do have to vote. I'll talk about this in just a minute. One of the questions I get all the time is, should I vote early? Well, we'll talk about that. But this is chilling. And I mean, what I heard, some of that I heard for the first time. I heard parts of that previously. You need to stock up. You need,
Yeah, I mean, he's talking about an event.
He's talking about an event, and he's talking about an event during which for 3 or 4 months there may be chaos. And you need to think about that. And by the way, when you think about huge apocalyptic type of events, it's the first 7 to 14 days where most of the damage is done. And so he's saying you need to prepare for 3 to 4 months.
Okay, so there's a couple things going on that, as a person who worked in media, I'm making observations, and I'm doing it from a point of 15, 20 years ago when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And the presentation of news is turned into incitement. And
Yes.
and I know people point to MSNBC, but so Kamala Harris does a town hall with Anderson Cooper. And a part of the town hall, he asked her about the border wall, which, was a very basic, he goes, talk about security, or would you, continue building the wall, would you finish the wall? He took more crap for that, to the point to where he went on CNN and basically said, all I did was ask a question. And Tinfoil Ted and I used to work for somebody that worked at CNN, and he said, Anderson Cooper, like her, hate him, was one of the more civil people.
Sure.
Was left-leaning, but still did journalism, so to speak. He's probably the least threatening person to her, because he asked her a question. And when you start to get that much pushback on your own, because I think they would consider him their own, that is a signal to me. The other part is what they've made about this Madison Square Garden thing. That it's, how many people even knew there was a 1939 American Nazi rally?
I didn't know that. I like to fancy myself just a passive student of history. I didn't realize
I
that.
only knew it because one time I watched a documentary on pre-World War II Germans in America, and the number of people that they, supposedly the motherland was calling. And there was a number of camps for youth in New York State. I mean, that's the only reason I know that happened. But again, pretty big leap. I mean, there's been political conventions in Madison Square Garden. There's been all kinds of rallies, everything in Madison Square Garden. The only thing that resembled anything from 1939 was that was held in a building called Madison Square Garden.
And so then you make the parallels and you try to hook it. So MSNBC is facing, I'm looking at something that I posted earlier, fierce backlash after using Nazi rally clips during its coverage of former President Donald Trump's historic campaign event at Madison Square Garden on Sunday. The network included footage from the 1939 Nazi rally in New York City and compared it to Trump's own rally, which, by the way, his rally packed the venue as well, 20,000 plus. But that jamboree happening right now, you see it there on your screen, and that place is particularly chilling because in 1939, more than 20,000 supporters of a different fascist leader, come back to fascist in a minute, Adolf Hitler, packed the garden for a so-called pro-America rally, the anchor said while rolling the footage. First of all, my guess is if you isolated that person, took their smartphone away, and said, define fascist,
Exactly. I was going to say define fascism.
they couldn't. And if you said, well, what are the earmarkings of fascist, or the markings of fascist? And now let's talk about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Where do you see similarities, and where is there no connection at all? They would stumble and fumble and bumble. This is disgusting, Joe. This is what people are
Well,
seeing.
it's dangerous. It's more than I mean, I think we've moved from offensive to you are literally trying to set TNT on fire in the middle of the circus.
It would be different if there was an assassination attempt on his life, right? I mean,
There've been one shot, one prepared.
unprepared, and we now know that the Iranians were plotting to do something. So this is, to me, you can talk about January 6th all day long. This is January 6th played out on TV screens, ad infinitum, on a reel, on loop, all day long. And there's a reason 31% of Americans trust mainstream media outlets now, and it's this garbage.
They've actually gone below Congress as far as
Yeah. And there's not a group of people who deserve it more.
So if it was fascism, my question is, where was Antifa?
Right?
I mean,
Fair question.
The anti-fascist movement, where were they?
Where were they? Where were they marching through the streets with all of their black gear?
Right.
Right? And trying to terrorize communities?
I mean, I know they're there because they were previously Occupy Wall Street.
That's right.
They didn't move. They're all there. They still have their black.
Right.
So Trump goes on Joe Rogan. I just want to kind of go through a little timeline. Goes on Joe Rogan, 20 million people, whatever. Kamala Harris goes on Shannon Sharp's podcast. We looked at it as like 800,000. There's an old term in like football recruiting, when you watch football recruiting, and that is, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. Mm-hmm. And Trump is acting like somebody that knows something. So is literally most people. They aren't like saying we're going to win, but they're acting differently.
Yes.
Kamala Harris's team seems to be acting as if there's peril ahead. You almost, if you watched any of the Michelle Obama stuff, it felt like shut up and let me handle this. Is what I felt.
Yep.
She was scolding women who have any relationship with men. So again, if I look at what they do versus what they're saying, it feels like they know something. Nate Silver's come out and said that if he had to guess, he said it's a Trump victory. I think the one thing we have to watch for is if this election gets held up. And just by the way, we're going to do our regular Tuesday podcast next Tuesday. We record at 9, goes up shortly after. We'll be back on Wednesday morning. And what I literally pray to God we're not reporting is that we're still waiting on battleground states to report.
There's a lot there. I want to come back to battleground states reporting in just a moment, but you said you used a football analogy. I'm going to use one. It's not about the X's and O's. It's about the Jimmies and the Joes.
Now, we're talking real football, not how Waltz uses football, where he said she called a pick six, which is literally not a play.
It's and this guy wants to tell you that he used to be a football. A pick six is when a defender intercepts a pass and takes it back to the house
Not exactly
for a touchdown.
called. It's not a play. Well, you can say, let's get a pick six.
Yeah, you can.
But
say,
it's not a play.
It's not like the defense
Not
can
on
go,
that.
okay, we're gonna intercept the ball and take it all the way back. That, by the way, that's the plan every stinking play, that the ball's in the air. I mean, what a bonehead. So this goes to my point. It's about the Jimmies and the Joes.
Yes.
You watch Tim Walz. You watch Kamala Harris. I do not for a second, Joe, believe that the average American looks at Kamala Harris and goes, yeah, that's the one I want sitting next to Vladimir Putin. That's the one I want sitting next to Xi Jinping. Absolutely not. I do not believe that in our heart of hearts, Americans look at Kamala Harris, and it's not about me being a male and her being a female.
I don't even know if it's that deep. I think it might be. I don't trust her to get my paycheck back or to get the economy solved.
Well,
You know what I
did you
mean?
see that? Did you see the video over the weekend? I think Sebastian Gorka played it yesterday on Salem Radio. There's about a 3-minute campaign ad of Kamala Harris when she is in California, and she talks about prosecuting parents for their kids not going to school. It is the most evil video I've ever seen. She is gleeful about sending law enforcement to the home of parents, arresting them, and saying, well, look, I want them to be seen differently in the eyes of their community. I want them to come out of their pockets to have to pay for these attorneys. I can back the charges out later.
So, bowl all that together, I think most people look at her and go, and I don't know if that's my leader.
No.
Okay, it could be that simple.
Maybe.
It could be as simple as, I'm not making as much as I used to. I'm having a hard time with my, mortgage payments. I've accumulated that. If I'm going to pick one or two people, I'm going with this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of people,
It's that
may
simple.
be that simple.
Yeah, I
then
might
you
be
go up a
overcooking
level,
it.
and it's, do I want her talking to Xi Jinping and Putin?
Yeah.
But I think for the most basic fundamental, I think a lot of people just look unemotional. I think there's a lot of unemotional people, and I think that's where they get in trouble when they've called out the African American men and men in general. A lot of men are just going, I'm not making as much as I mean, there's a lot of guys that are just saying, I need to make more money, and the economy was better 4 years ago.
I saw a poll over the weekend that said that she was, it might have been the Ipsos poll, that she had now curried about 90% favor with 90% of the black men. I don't believe that one.
I think that's a lie. So, but I don't want to get too far off track.
Yeah.
But I wanted to put some substance to it. You have the people that are worried about foreign policy and all that, but a bulk of people, it comes down to the economy.
Let me come back to battleground states, if I may. So there is a blog in Ohio.
But let's get through the trend. I didn't want to interrupt you because I got you off track.
Well, no, it's about the Jimmies and the Joes. It's about the players on the field. And when I look at J.D. Vance, I'll send you over to X. I'll post the clip later at Jack Windsor. J.D. Vance is in a town hall, and he's talking about the intersection between politics and friends and family. And he's basically saying, look, if you're ending relationships because of your politics, you're doing it wrong. That guy's a leader. Versus, juxtaposed to Tim Walz, who's on a Zoom with AOC, ripping a comedian, and calling essentially half of America Nazis. There is such a stark contrast between Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, Kamala Harris, and Tim Walz. And that's what I mean by the Jimmies and the Joes. You look at that and you go, that team's not going to win.
And before we get to the battleground states, do you think there's panic?
I think there's sheer and utter panic. And I think that's why you see Barack Obama and Michelle Obama wheeled out to talk down, right? Like, you will do this, you'll eat your peas and you'll like it because we told you to, and we represent black voters. That is the most offensive thing. Like, what happened to independence? What happened to thinking? What happened to, making your own decision? And so they cart them out there, and they're doing their thing.
Do you think there's a segment of the population that looks at that and goes, the only time you need me is when you need my vote? I haven't seen you in 4 years.
I sure hope so. But there's this other thing. Clay and Buck were talking about this yesterday. There's this belief that maybe 25% to 30% of black male voters are going to vote for Donald Trump. And, is that the tipping point? Is that the point beyond which identity politics dies, essentially? Like, it's the beginning of the end. But sometimes we predict those things, but they don't show up.
Correct.
To me, it's as stark of a contrast between what's accurate and true and who's fighting for you and who's really using you as a pawn in this election. So I think as we see the totals roll in on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week, it'll be interesting to see how black voters decide.
But if you don't have a filter, you don't know what truth and idiocy is. We're talking about things that we see that are so far over the top.
Yeah.
But if you're getting up every day and going to work and you don't have time to decipher through it, you may not know. It's kind of like my daughter on Sunday said, I haven't had time to research it. What about issue 1? And she just said, can you explain it to me? And so we went over it. I would consider her kind of the grab your gear type people that get up, go to work, and she doesn't. You drive to work, you listen to your playlist. You're going to listen to I know Joe Rogan has a big audience, but not everybody's listening to Joe Rogan or Theo Vaughn. There's people that are just going to vote how they feel, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be people I wonder how many people are not going to vote too. I wonder if some people are just going to sit out, and all of those go into what's about to happen over the next 7 days.
Yeah, and I think and by the way, if you're listening to this and you're an evangelical, if the evangelicals get out and vote, the election's over.
Which
And
they
I think
haven't traditionally.
They haven't. There's about 34% of that population that has sat on their hands. But I think
And there's been some big national pastors that have called for people to go to the polls too. That actually has been a very open. I mean, it's kind of been something that they go, "Oh, you should vote." There's been, I think, more of a rallying cry, at least in evangelical, and I think to get them to understand that you have to participate.
Well, and I think it's working. And the way that I recognize that is just look at what the left is doing as a consequence. How many times have you heard over the past several weeks? Well, those churches that are preaching that way, they should lose their tax-exempt status. There's a separation of churches. It terrifies.
Unlike how they used to go to black churches and put them in buses and drive them to the polls.
Well, but we can't talk about that, Joe, because the rules don't apply evenly, right? We're literally talking. I was talking
That was
to
a thing.
Well, I think it still is a thing, if you want me to be dead honest. But I want to talk real quickly about this battleground thing.
Okay.
There is a progressive blog in Ohio. It's funded by the Hans-Jörg Wyss, Swiss billionaire, George Soros type money. The parent company funnels the money in. And I'm reading some of the stuff that they're putting out this week. And what they're doing is they're prepping the audience. They're going, well, y'all can just relax. I know you have anxiety. We're not going to know for a while who the president is.
Yeah.
That, to me, is the mothership going, all right, listen, we got to make people aware that
And
it's not
corporate
going to...
media is saying the same thing.
Same thing. And so what does that do? That creates opportunity. It creates a risk of shenanigans. And I think, to me, my biggest concern is if you wait 2 days, 3 days, 7 days, and you have the shenanigans again in 2024 that you did in 2020, that's what concerns me the most. I think there are a core group of people who are just not going to tolerate that.
So
this
go
election
back
cycle.
to the 1960 election. We'll do a little history here. When John F. Kennedy ran against Richard Nixon, they couldn't get Illinois in. Why? Because Northern Illinois was waiting on Southern Illinois to put their ballots in, to do their count, because they just wanted to know what they needed to beat. That is a thing. That happened. And also, so just go back and look at history. And back then, West Virginia was also being tampered with a little bit. And back then, Richard Nixon came out and said he had every right to call for a recount and to do it, but he felt like he could not do that to the country. I don't think we're even close to that kind of thing. Now, just so you know, cheating happens, and it has happened.
It happens all the time.
But if we have every battleground state pull in a 1960 Illinois and everybody's holding each other hostage, it's going to lead to unrest from both sides.
100%. And I mean that. Like, the one thing I agree with Molly Ball about, there's a tremendous amount of anxiety, and both sides are saying we can't survive under the opposite person.
Right.
And so, and by the way, we saw this in 2016. Do you remember how the left went apoplectic when Donald Trump won? I mean, it was insane. There was rioting. There was violence. There was, from day one, this, the machine had been turned on, and they were against him, and they're still against him.
See, with the reporting, and I listened to a podcast that Racket puts out, and every Monday night they do about an hour and a half of podcast, and they always do the live toss to MSNBC hosted. What's her name?
Rachel Maddow?
Yeah, Maddow from, who was the press secretary under?
Psaki.
Psaki passes to Maddow. And it is one of the most, you listen to it a couple times and you wonder, who the hell are they talking to? Because it is so absurd sometimes. And that pass off from last night was a real, it's like you have every right to, the undertone was you have every right to hit the streets and get violent if this doesn't, and she wasn't saying it exactly, but if you listen to it, you go, they're really talking about we just can't let this happen, so we may have to do what we have to do.
They're dog whistling.
Well, they are, And your comment about that blog is consistent with what I've heard too, where it's like they're preparing us to not know on election night, and that absolutely can't happen in this country. We can get the votes counted. How do we do it in Ohio?
Well, I want to go back to before we had all of these voting machines, right? I mean, you can't tell me that there weren't times in Ohio election history when we had paper ballots that we didn't know the night of. I mean, it's insane, Joe. We have electronic
But we're accepting that.
machines. Well,
You know what I mean? We're accepting this narrative.
we should not accept it. We absolutely should not accept it.
See, they always say you may not know. I don't understand why we may not know.
Well, because journalists can't do math. It's real simple. I mean, when you look at the number of outstanding ballots, right? Ohio Secretary of State website, you go there, they have a dashboard, you can see it. There's a certain number of ballots, right? And there's a certain number of people who have voted. And you just start doing the math. And if you have to get creative, you go, okay, it looks so far like the split is, 60% Republican, 40% Democrat. So if I extrapolate that out over here to the other 200,000 votes that have not yet been counted, and by the way, it's probably not the same ratio because there still is a disparity between, and all of that gap is closing, who votes the day of, who sends in a mail-in ballot. But you can start running the numbers and go, well, no, this race is over.
See, I think if we run into an evening of constant too close to call, too close to call, too close to call, I think it's going to start to agitate people.
100%. Because in 2020, we saw 3% of precincts reporting, and they called the race. They called the race for their candidate. And, I just think...
If we run into a too close to call over and over and over, what is that going to tell you?
It's going to tell you that they're trying, they think they have a margin that is manageable. They think that they have the ability to count, recount, do whatever they need to do to make up the difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
There's people in the know that say Trump could win the popular vote, and he is leading in the battleground states, and that is a trend. They have to stop a trend or just outright, to beat him then. If that's all true, let's just assume it's true, then you have to stop his momentum somehow, or you have to implement something to prevent him from winning.
Yes.
So what, if you were just sitting here dreaming up, and let's don't be irresponsible, but if you were sitting here with the knowledge you have of how things work, what do you anticipate? Because I just have a bad feeling that we're just going to see weird things now for the next 7 days.
Oh, 100% we're going to see weird things. And it all comes down to follow the money. In Ohio, we know that issue 1, which is aligned with the Democrats, the progressive left, it's attracted $7 million more dollars, a couple of weeks before election time. Why is that? Because the race is tight. And so you're going to see that. Kamala Harris is reporting $1 billion, even though congressional committees are looking into Act Blue and maybe foreign money being bundled and sent to Democratic candidates, but I digress there.
So if people want to know about that, that is on your site.
It's all on the Ohio Press Network.
Yes, okay.
Yep, at theohiopressnetwork.com. But I think Molly Ball's onto something. I think weather. I think claims
Explain
of
weather.
scandal.
When you say weather, explain
Well,
what
weather
that
could be. So, for example, I'm going to talk in a minute about why I think it's okay to vote early. I get that question a lot, so we'll address it in just a moment. But I think it was in 2022 in Nevada, there is some belief that the Republicans took a hit because they waited until Election Day to vote, and there was some inclement weather that kept some of the people from going to the polls to vote. So in places like Wisconsin, where maybe it can get cold, maybe you can get a snowstorm, who knows? Or maybe you have, the grid goes out, something happens. And all of a sudden, now you can't go vote on that day. And so maybe the polls open back up and they're going to give you an allowance to vote later, but then all the other people who are going to, there's so much that can happen, right? So maybe there's weather. Maybe there is a scandal that breaks. We saw in...
See, I don't think a scandal does anything anymore.
Well, I think it does if you're on the right side of the aisle.
What's the scandal?
Well,
they've tried
Do you want to know what I think?
everything against Donald Trump.
Well, but you know what we haven't talked about yet? AI. We haven't talked about fabricated videos. We haven't talked about fabricated audio. And the left is masterful at putting something out and then later going, oh yeah, we kind of got that wrong. But when you're talking about a margin this big, Joe, one of my concerns is we're going to see something or hear something
Is
that
the
is not
margin really
credible.
that thin?
Well, I have someone that I trust who's in Washington, D.C., and he's a pollster.
It
and we
must be
talk
the
about-
one person.
Yeah, there are very few. You're one of them. But he tells me, because a lot of people go, well, how in the world are they voting for that? And they point to Kamala. Well, there are 50% of people on the other side of the aisle who go, how in the world are we voting for that?
Yes,
34th
right.
time indicted criminal, whatever. So, there is a deep divide. And I do think that it's close. And I think that it's close because the left has all the money. The left has the press. The left has big tech. The left has the censorship industrial complex. When you think about that, imagine if the press did its job. And imagine how much their policies suck, that they have all of this momentum, all of this money, all of this censorship, and they're still not ahead. And so, yeah, I think it can. I would say, let's look at the reverse. In 2020, it was Hunter Biden's laptop. In 2024, it might be Donald Trump's secret video. Who knows what's going to happen? But Joe, we're talking about people, you said it, Jen Psaki passing to Rachel Maddow, who are basically saying all bets are off. Whatever it takes to get that lunatic from getting back into the White House.
Well,
is
you
fair.
compare him to Hitler and Mussolini because anybody who was a patriot or whatever back then would have stopped them, and that's what it starts to feel like. A couple things real quick.
And real quick, the other that I don't want to say is the inevitable. And I think that that's still in play 7 days out.
What is the inevitable? The assassination attempt.
Yes.
What do you think about burning ballots in Oregon and Washington? I have a theory there that that's okay. Those are two of the most liberal states. That seems to be staging to me. That they're creating something to be able to blame it. I mean, it's chess, not checkers.
To discredit, so the right goes, look, they're cheating, and then they can prove, well, no.
I think they wanted to make it look like the right wing is blowing up ballot torching, so
I
that then
see.
they have a precedent. Well, they were doing it in Oregon and Washington. Now they're doing it in Philadelphia.
Okay, I didn't realize that was the opposite way, so I wasn't up to snuff.
I
on
mean,
that
that's playing chess. That doesn't surprise me. Late ballots. They're reporting that Nevada will go 3 days after the election if necessary, and Philadelphia District Attorney is suing Elon Musk because of his $1 million giveaway on his signatures for PAC. So those are all kind of the backstory things going
Sure.
on. At least 3 of them, and there's probably 5 that have happened since we started this podcast.
Yeah, and my understanding is there are hundreds of attorneys in battleground states that are on the standby,
course.
ready to deal with stuff just like this. And there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that we don't see. There are issues that aren't even reported yet. Those are some of them, right? And I think we'll see that. That's going to amplify as we head closer to November 5th. But this is the stuff, right? I mean, I think most people watching this go, I just want to go pull the lever, fill in the circle, punch the button,
And go home.
And I want to go
Yeah,
home
yeah.
and know at 11 o'clock who won.
Yep.
That's what people want. And anybody who doesn't want that, you've got to ask yourself why.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. Want to do a couple of quick things we talked about last week. CBS made a comment on their 60 Minutes interview. We were talking about that. They said they didn't doctor the answer of Kamala Harris, but they will not release the transcript, which if CBS didn't have anything to hide, that transcript would have been
If
released.
you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to hide.
Make sure we check out your website, the Ohio Press Network, because you are putting up more video now and kind of following you there. Also, if you have anything breaking or whatever, we want to follow the Ohio Press Network as well. Also, catch out Joe Staten. His podcast goes up, and I believe he will. Isabella is behind the camera. When does his podcast go up? Saving the Republic.
Yeah, one went up yesterday night,
Okay.
and then there's going to be another one tomorrow night.
Okay, so 2 a week on Saving the Republic. You can get 3 a week.
3 a
All right,
week.
you can
Monday,
get that.
Wednesday, Friday.
And you can get that Monday, Wednesday, Friday on the Grab Your Gear Network. So check that out as well. Also, of course, this podcast, the Grab Your Gear Network. For Jack, anything else you want to leave us with before we take off? What should we, just give us the maybe 3 things we can look at going into this week as we wrap it up that should be triggers that we need to be, kind of on guard.
Yeah, well, I think just be aware of what the mainstream media is saying and doing, and try to program your mind to go, okay, the opposite might be true. That's number 1. And then vote early. And I'm not necessarily a fan of all alternative methods of voting when there aren't safeguards. But number one, if you vote early, you take away the risk that something happens on election day and you can't get
Which
to the
I
polls.
voted early.
Second, if you vote early, you allow your candidate to actually reallocate their time, attention, and money to other people who have not yet voted, and that helps them maximize their turnout down the stretch. And then the third thing that it does is it takes away that mirage, right? Like if one party owns one method of voting, then it's entirely possible that they're up big, and that can be a detriment. People can go, well, I'm not going to go vote because, or Trump's up so big. What do you mean what do you mean? It must be rigged. And I'm not saying that there isn't rigging and cheating going on, but I'm saying that when you dissipate that mirage, it helps with the transition and the election reporting. So those are three reasons I would say if you can vote early, get out and vote early.
Okay, and then we'll watch, and if anything else comes up, Ohio Press Network will be back here next Tuesday, and we will be back here next Wednesday, the day after Election Day, to see what's going on. For Jack Windsor, I am Joe, and Apprentice Isabella behind the camera and the producer of the Grab Your Gear program and podcast. Thanks for joining us. We will talk to you down the road.